Morning, Randall.
Hey Andrew, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Early morning.
Yeah, where are you?
I'm in California.
Oh, it is early morning. Yep.
Yep.
Bay Area?
Nope, I am in Irvine.
Ah, Southern Bay Area almost, right?
Kind of something like that.
Yeah.
Now I'm now starting to work at LF, so that's why I work with a lot of people from Austin because I work with Tim Serwick, who is in Austin.
Oh, you
So
said you moved from there recently.
no, I'm starting to work at LF. So the
Ah,
person that I'm working with in LF in education is in Austin. So the meeting is
gotcha.
at like 6 and yeah,
Oh,
my time. So yeah,
yeah. No, I'm sorry.
it happened. Oh, I wake up at 4, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I get it. I work for an Indian-based company, right? So my difference is 11 and a half hours.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
so occasionally I have those calls and occasionally I have the night calls, but you just something you manage.
Yep, yep. My thing is that Glenn, the other person in SKF, is in Belgium. So we literally have like opposite schedules.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I joined early because I figured why not? I usually join pretty early. I like to be, I'm pretty organized with my time. So,
That's pretty important, especially if you're a part of OpenSSF or LF in general. There's like 100 meetings a week.
yep. Yep, there are.
Hey, I on the Google Docs, I created the new meeting. Oh, let's see if you have updated your. If you can just highlight your attendance.
Yep, I will do that.
Okay.
For the record, I don't know if it matters, but our notes say end user notes 2022
They
that we've
do.
just continued.
Okay, where is that?
That's in the header. So, like,
Oh,
if you
oh,
actually,
oh, you updated. Okay, thanks. Hadn't caught that one.
the reason I say that is because usually what ends up happening is that at some point these notes are going to get transcribed in a markdown and they
Yep.
usually get checked into the repo. So that's just for FYI.
Yeah, no, good catch. Good morning, folks. I see people are starting to join. Hello, Dan.
Howdy.
Morning, Grub.
Hello.
Hello. We're going to get to see the hat selection today.
I could track something down, sure.
I just always look forward to that. All right, let's give it a couple more minutes. Nice, nice. I definitely appreciate
Is that a Shiner's hat?
it. Shriner.
Oh, those are cool.
It's like I'm in Marrakesh now.
I kind of wish I was there now.
All right, I'm gonna have to start thinking about hats here.
Thinking, if I wasn't wearing earphones, I would have brought down my Cobra, which would really, I think, set a ketamine. But I'll tell you what, I'll just show you real quick.
There you go. Good. I was just in Africa for a couple of weeks. I'm one of those every day.
You're on mute, Jock.
All right, maybe one more minute, and then we'll get going. All right, for those of you there, if you haven't, can you please update your attendance on the Google Doc? And then from this group, do we have a scribe volunteer?
I can give it a whirl.
All right, thank you, Jacques. All right, why don't we get going? First thing, if you see my head going back and forth, it's not because I have a nervous tick, but because of the fact that our security team allows us to view Google Docs on our work computer, but I have to keep my personal computer open if I want to edit Google Docs. So that's what this is about. Anyway, thank you all for joining. While our inestimable leader is on vacation himself, I'll shepherd this one call and he'll be back for the next one. I myself have been gone for 3 weeks, so I'm doing a little bit of catch up here. But thank you. As far as for today's agenda, let's start with, do we have any new joinees today who would like to introduce themselves? Thought I heard somebody. Hey, Aaron.
Yes, I'm Aaron Wislang. I'm working at Microsoft. I'm a cloud advocate working on open source and Linux in our developer advocacy organization.
Thank you. Do you work with Jay? I think you're on the line, Jay.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
I am indeed on the line. I am indeed.
All right. Well, Aaron, nice to have you be a part of the team here. Okay.
Mike Lieberman. I'm from Kusari, a supply chain security startup, and also I'm a member of the Salsa Steering Committee and the Supply Chain Integrity Working Group, and a maintainer on Fresca.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Towards the end, we'll ask for updates from other SIGs. And it sounds like it'd be great if you could share a little bit about what's going on in Salsa. And then what was the other one you mentioned?
The Supply Chain Integrity Working Group. as
Yeah.
well as the Fresca project.
Okay, it'd be great to get updates on those. All right, so from last week, I'm looking at last week's agenda. We had some updates on the GitHub pages and the taxonomy updates. Anything we need to follow up with on those two topics today? Dan?
I took an action last week to set up the start of some issue templates in the repo, and I never got the required access to do that. So I'm happy to do my action, but I don't have whatever the required access level is into this repo. So if somebody can do that, that would be great. I can do my action.
Chrome, do you know who we should reach out to get him access for that?
Yeah, operations@openssf.org. CC Andrew and Jonathan so they can say, yeah, we approve. And then Khalil will get on that.
Operations@openssf.org.
Right.
Okay. Got it. Dan, do you want to reach out? Do you want me to?
If you could, I think it'd be better if yeah.
That's fine. I'll CC you. All right. Anything on the taxonomy update from the last call? Okay. Any new business? I have one piece, but I'll wait in case anyone would like to share any new business or agenda items, topics for today.
Yeah, I had an agenda item that I just stuck in there within like the
Okay.
last 5-10 minutes. So in a couple of the other working groups and SIG meetings, we've been going over, and I've mentioned this a couple of times before over the last few months, but with the taxonomy updates done in this particular working group, we've been talking about it, and we think it might be a great idea to take some of this stuff, join with the best practices group, join with supply chain integrity, create like create a SIG around uniformity in taxonomy across the entirety of the OpenSSF. We got a lot of initiatives that we have going on in the OpenSSF, and we should really be on the same sheet of music, especially when we have a great SIG like the Diagrammer Society that's working on a lot of materials to put out to tell our story.
Mm-hmm.
We can't effectively tell that story if everyone is speaking with a different language. So we thought it might be best to get everybody together, and I'm proposing that here as well. We talked about it in other SIG and other working groups. Everyone seems to say, hey, maybe this is something we could try. I'm leaving it on the floor here. What say everyone?
So so my only question here, is this a SIG, a working group? Is it a limited time endeavor to make sure that the different groups are aligning on their taxonomy? Or do you feel it's something needs to be ongoing?
I think it might be something that needs to be ongoing, right? We got even outside of the OpenSSF, there are other working groups, there are other communities that are doing some great things, and languages being created almost daily. We could come in here and decide, well, what does that language mean to us?
Mm-hmm.
So it should be something that's kind of ongoing as new technology emerges, as old wishful thinking type of technology becomes more realistic, right? This might be a good position for us to have a space where we talk about that, understand what that means to us, and then formalize that language across the entirety of the OpenSSF. This should be something that's ongoing.
Okay. You said you brought it up in the other working groups. Have you put together any kind of a summary or proposal?
Nope, but we can. I just want to make, I mean, in the effort to say, hey, how's everybody feel about this? And then if we say, yeah, that sounds good, put together something, because that has to go before the TAC, right? So then we can put together something that's not done in vain.
Yeah. Well, I think we can agree it's certainly needed, right? Because we know that there are these multiple initiatives going on. But what you're suggesting is that it deserves its own space as opposed to being under one of the other existing groups.
Well, you know what? So I even thought that maybe this should be something that sits as a sub underneath the Diagrammer Society, because the Diagrammer Society is putting together information that can be consumed by everybody about what's going across the
Mhm.
OpenSSF, right? Across all the working groups and SIGs and everything that we do. I thought it might be a subcommittee under that. I don't know, I shrug. I feel like that could be something that we discuss in a TAC meeting or something at a larger level. I don't know. But I can put together a proposal that suggests the same. Would love some help with that. But maybe, I really want to see what the rest of the room feels like with regards to this before we start putting pen to paper. And then now we're beating stuff around before before it even gets out the door. And I apologize. This is my cardio time, so the breathing gets a little hot. It gets a little rough.
We know we're OpenSSF ranks for you, Jay. Michael Crow, you had your hands up?
Yeah. So agree with Jay on that. I think, yeah, there's been some confusion a little bit, and also as somebody who's joined a lot of the different groups across the LF, including the CD Foundation, CNCF, and so on, it seems like actually right about this time, a lot of people are all starting to come up, are starting to create some combination of supply chain taxonomy or also supply chain ontology sorts of groups. And that sort of thing might, and if everybody starts inventing the wheel, even if, let's say, the OpenSSF has their understanding, then the CD Foundation is going to have a completely different one. The CNCF is going to have a completely different one. And so anything we can do as like sort of, more broadly would be super useful. And then I think the other thing I wanted to bring up real quickly, and I think it might have been brought up in a previous meeting. I was looking through the notes, but there has been a couple of papers on folks who have actually taken work from the OpenSSF, CNCF, and so on, and actually generated a taxonomy out of it. And so maybe sort of not necessarily blanket adopting it, but sort of saying, hey, does this seem reasonable to adopt or at least build on top of, might be useful.
Crow?
Yeah, a while back, the education SIG had started to work on the mobilization plan rework, and we found out we had a lot of inconsistencies in how terminology was used. And actually, Avishai and Randall here helped start efforts around a glossary. And we talked about this briefly with the TAC, that it would be great if we had a foundation level set of terms, call it a dictionary, a glossary, a taxonomy, whatever the final word can get sorted out. But it would be great if we had a common repository and a common language across all the working groups and SIGs. And then the same idea for personas as well, because a lot of us use personas in our work. So it'd be great if we had a foundation agreed upon set of personas and user stories we worked off of. So I'm in full support of what Jay is suggesting, and I would love to try to unify all these efforts. And there's energy in different pockets. Let's combine it and actually get something moving forward.
So it sounds like it behooves us to get something down on paper or PPT or whatever we choose to use, right? But do we want to bring this to the Mike Wooster level or go up through the TAC and Brian and others and then see where it goes?
I think it should go to the TAC. It definitely helps align with the TAC's goals of trying to help get consistency across the foundation. And I think they'll be very supportive. I know if I was on the TAC, I would be.
Not a hint there, is it? No. All right, Jay, do you want to take a first cut? And I'm sure there are plenty of us on the call here who'd be happy to help provide input and edit. And I see Randall, you've got your hand up too.
Yeah, going off what Krog said, I can also confirm that the lexicon did make the official first round of we do have permission to continue that and develop that, and there is funding for infrastructure and all that for that. So
I can
Okay.
certainly take the first cut. We'll need some support. This will be the first one I've written for the OpenSSF. So if anybody has a template I can use, I take that, but I can definitely take the first cut.
Might be a good idea. Go ahead.
I don't know if it's a template. I have a proposal I used for the TAC before, Jay. I'll push it over your way.
Thank you very much, sir.
And can you copy that link on the notes? Oh, thanks. All right. Thank you, Jay, for bringing that up. Sounds like we have a general consensus. It's important to move forward. Any other items?
Oh, I just wanted to jump in real quick with a trivia point. Mike, you were saying earlier that we should look at the software taxonomy paper and talk to the researchers. They're here already. That's something that's been discussed and has been worked on. So you have an excellent intuition, I think.
Nice. Nice.
All right. Thank you. A couple items. I wanted to see if anybody has read, it came out a few weeks ago by the Atlantic Council. They do some good stuff here. It's called Avoiding the Success Trap Towards Policy for Open Source Software as Infrastructure. I don't know if anybody's read that very long paper. It's got, I've just gone through the highlights of it. They certainly like analogies. They use analogy of open source as infrastructure compared to water systems, capital markets, and roads and bridges. But they make some really good points here. And this is really a paper on how to advocate what we're trying to achieve with the federal government. They have 3 points here: get the government to walk the walk of being a responsible open source consumer by establishing various program offices, develop an open source best practices framework through NIST, and develop open source mature companies and nonprofit, develop a standard for maturing open source companies and nonprofits. So if you haven't, I'll put the link in here, or has that already been done? But it's a good paper. It's got lots of interesting information. It's not 100% on point for us, but it gives, I think, a nice industry view and a nice view of how we should be advocating and what we should be advocating towards the federal government. So I'd recommend people perusing it when they have a few minutes.
Yeah, I'll plus one that.
I'm sorry, Jock, go ahead.
Thank you, Jim. I also added that link to the notes as well. Thank you for that.
All right.
Yes, I'll plus one that people should read it. I think 2 things that were really helpful that came out of it that were important because it's a document aimed at policymakers. They're the target audience. 2 things that were very important to take away from it, apart from the analogies. One was they point out that the criticality of open source doesn't come from the authors, maintainers, suppliers, however you want to describe them. It comes from the consumers, and putting all the burden on producers is unfair because they're not the ones who are capturing the value. And the other one is that they point out that there's, this maybe goes to us as well, is that there's somewhat of an overfocus on open source as a security risk, rather than like the general health of open source as something that's critical to things. So we think about road and bridge security and water supply security and so on, but we also think about all the other aspects of water supply, making it efficient, making it work smoothly, making sure it gets to the right places and the right people and the right quality. So I think they did a really great job of sort of explicating that.
Yep. Jim.
At that point makes a lot of sense when you think about it, but it seems to fly in the face of some of the criticality score calculations of like how all the criticality score stuff is based upon statistics from the repository, and like that's really not where the criticality comes from. It comes from where it's ending up being used, but we don't have like statistical information that's produced by all these large companies stating this is all these are all the artifacts that we use, because you can't get an SBOM unless you're buying a product from the company.
There was, I proposed a while back, I had to back out of it for time commitments, a more general estimation sort of ranking procedure, partly because of that paucity of end data. I think the purchasing power of the federal government will be moving the needle on SBOMs over time. because they're going to be insisting on it, and they are the largest purchasers in the world. So pretty much everybody bends to their will eventually.
Can we get SBOMs like public?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't think so at this point, but I won't be surprised if it becomes a thing.
Yeah, that's actually being
that
talked
seems-
about right now.
Yeah, that seems like the only thing that's going to actually get it, like, right. The only way to get this information into how critical a project is to get the SBOMs to not to be produced for the consumer, but to be produced for the general public to use as a data set.
Yeah.
Jim, you've had your hand up for a little bit.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. I was just going to add, I also threw a link in the chat to a recording done in January by CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. They had a panel session, which is recorded and on YouTube, around government policies for open source software, and talk through some of the government policy aspects. I also have, and some of you may know Remy DeCosmaker. He moved into Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services in their Office of Digital Services to promote open source. And we created a Slack channel together when I was with LFPH that I have still have access to, that have other government digital services offices interested in open source. So if we wanted that as a sounding board or invite Remy for this, I could coordinate that.
I think one thing all this points out is the fact that, and we've brought this up before, we really do need to have some government participation on this working group, right? So I think we should all be thinking about who we know, who we're connected to, who's kind of relevant to this topic. And then having that person and maybe Jonathan reach out and try and bring them into this group. It's really, as we know, it's not a massive time commitment, but it's important to get their input. So I think we should all be thinking about that. Probe?
Directly to that, we could talk to friend of the show, Dr. SBOM, Mr. Alan Friedman. He is a frequent OpenSSF visitor, and anytime you say SBOM enough times, he shows up to a call magically. So if we keep saying it, he would pop in. But he would definitely be, I think, open to coming and talking to us. And I think he would love that as the kind of driving force at CISA for SBOM to be actually get end user requirements. Oh, man, somebody new just popped in. I thought it was him. But I think he would be very interested in kind of getting the enterprise perspective on SBOM requirements. And then I was also going to mention that, like, things like the Vulnerability Disclosures Working Group, we're talking about potentially adopting the upstream OpenVex project and then starting to evangelize that. And then, like, from a foundation perspective, if we can try to find tooling to make it a GitHub action to generate an SBOM at the end of a developer's pipeline. And then as they fix an update, they automatically, is an action that automatically barfs out a VEX advisory. So we can influence things at an upstream level so that at least the source projects potentially might have these artifacts. And then it's a very big debate in the vendor community. I also participate in a group called FIRST, the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams. And unsurprisingly, many vendors do not want their SBOMs public. So there's like two big camps of, we want everything public versus we want everything private. So that'll eventually work itself out. However, it probably will first be to purchasers of commercialized software, but ideally through things like the foundation, you might be able to influence upstream to get the core projects to have these artifacts, so at least people could start to do some of their own analyses.
Yeah, I'd add to that, I've been involved in the healthcare sector's efforts for adopting SBOM, specifically medical devices. And that gets into an ugly political match around medical devices and how they provide vulnerability information to hospitals and organizations that buy them in the first place, and who's responsible for the SBOM, and how did the SBOM shared, and is that an SBOM snap in time, versus another update?
To kind of summarize that problem, did any of you see the last year at Austin, the presentation by the open source team at New York Presbyterian Hospital? That
That's
was-
Staggerboard, and yeah, that, a matter of fact, they actually just had an issue raised on GitHub yesterday talking about outputs from Daggerboard into JSON, which I thought fit this conversation well too. So
Yeah, that was really an eye-opening presentation for me. When you think about this is a medium to large one single medium to large hospital that has to create, that wants to create SBOMs for 1,800 different medical devices for just that one hospital, then you begin to understand the complexity of the issue we're trying to address here. Yeah.
yeah, and on a side note, they're also at very, very early preliminary stages, but maybe a first medium-sized organization, healthcare organization moving into creating an OSPO. They're still very interested in Linux Foundation, other things to build in, so there's a thread there as well.
Yeah. All right. I had one other topic I wanted to bring up, and we've actually discussed this before. As we want to continue to broaden our membership base and actually broaden our excuse me, kind of impact across the LF and the industry, we wanted to make sure that there's a bridge with FinOS. And I think you have some good folks here for that conversation. We got Jim, we got Rob, and myself. I'm on the board of FinOS. So I don't know, Jim and Rob, if you guys are going to be regular participants on this call or not, but I know there's an interest on both sides, on OpenSSF and the End User Working Group, and also on FinOS, to make sure that there's a strong bridge and we're kind of exchanging ideas back and forth. I think we need to figure out how to kind of institutionalize that somehow, make sure summaries of our meetings get to FinOS. And maybe the output is in the open source readiness working group or some other group within FinOS, but I know their members are very interested in what we're doing also, and it may help with bringing in some of those members to participate here.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get 30 seconds on that, Andrew, I think you're also in the education SIG. So Rob and I have been trying to commit to having the education SIG and this working group onto our calendars. Specifically in support of, as Andrew mentioned, open source readiness. We are developing both a body of knowledge around open source operations, and Andrew and Wipro were kind enough to contribute an open source maturity model that's in the first stages of development. We have a vision for FinOS members, financial institutions, around creating, comparable to like a CMMI, Project Management Institute, et cetera, body of knowledge of core consensus built activities and education and training that constitute what we as the membership think should be an open source program office and an open source activities in the organization. So more than just the OSPO construct, how from a maturity model standpoint, level 1 through level 5, are open source activities done either ad hoc level 1 or fully integrated so that you're proactively using open source software for business value. We're still in the early stages of that, but it's really exciting both to see the level of engagement from the membership, as well as working with Andrew and others here to build those bridges between specific security activities, specific training activities, et cetera, that would inculcate a model that will contribute back to open source for everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks,
excellent.
Jim.
I haven't got much to add to that other than, we at FinOS, we're already consuming OpenSSF materials. We're trying to put OpenSSF best practices badges on all of our projects and embody the best practices that you guys come up with in our open source projects. But we want to, as Jim says, we want to try and make sure we're linking off to all the good materials that get produced by OpenSSF, because everyone sees you as the experts, but perhaps it's not completely clear to OSPOs where to go. They don't. This is literally something that Andrew brought up in a meeting yesterday. They need to be led down a path of process, and so we're hoping to provide that for obviously the finance industry, but through regulated industries generally. I think is kind of where we see that going, and we're lucky to have Jim coming on board, who's got a bit of a healthcare kind of slant on the world, so that's pretty handy. But we definitely intend to try and attend more of your meetings and reach out to you and try and make the links, because I think it's pointless us trying to work in a vacuum here. And in a similar way, we're trying to build these bridges with the to-do group as well, who we see as being equally profoundly knowledgeable about OSPOs and running open source within an organization. So these are like pieces of the puzzle for us. So yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Any other thoughts or comments? And Jacques, I'm thinking you may have gotten a lot more scribing requirement than you had expected during this call today. So thank you for that in advance.
Probably for the best. Otherwise, I talk too much.
All right, if there are no more agenda items or comments, then we can adjourn and get some time back, which I know we all appreciate.
I have a point of order. We do have notes from other working groups, and I believe Coreb is the point person.
Yes,
I had one short
sorry.
thing. I've mentioned it before, where the Vulnerability Disclosure Working Group has made 2 coordinated vulnerability disclosure guides already. Our first guide was focused on open source maintainers. Our second guide was focused on how security researchers and helping them work better with upstream projects. Well, our new project is we are working on a CVD guide for consumers of open source. And we would, patches are welcome. Right now we're assembling kind of a table of contents of topics we'd like to talk about. So if anyone has any feedback from a consumer perspective, what you'd like to see out of a guide like that, we would love to get that feedback, and you're welcome to participate as that effort kicks off and we start the writing. We hope our target is probably August-ish to get the guide published. So we'll see, depending on how much collaboration we get, is how quickly that'll happen.
So I hope Rob and Jim can take a look at that. Is that in the vulnerability repo? Working group
It is.
repo? Or?
Yeah, that was my question, matter of fact. Yeah, we'll point to that.
Yep. Yep, we have an issue that you can, if you just want to watch it, to track progress, and then I actually put a link to the start of the document itself. And we'll collaborate very actively in a Google document, and then at some point we'll cut it over and make it a markdown file in GitHub, like the other guides.
Yeah, and strategically, Rob's always a couple steps ahead of me, but we're still trying to kind of map out what would be like the 4 or 5, setting aside the training, 4 or 5 publications or guides to include in a body of knowledge to immediately reference kind of around all things security. So it'd be great to kind of have that as a short list, and we'll go ahead and incorporate that into our development.
The foundation on their webpage actually has a guides link. If you go to it, kind of highlights a lot of the already existing artifacts, like the concise guide for developing and selecting software, that type of stuff.
Perfect.
Can someone drop us a link in the chat for the
I can. Give me 1 second.
All right, any other working group or SIG updates? Okay. Well, then I think unless there's anything else or any other points of order, then I think we can close today's call. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for attending, and see you in a few weeks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.